Hey everyone, I'm Matt Friedman, Matt F. the Oracle. It's Friday, December 11th, 2015, and it's time for another edition of the College Daily Slant, powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. This is the PFF radio show dedicated to college football and daily fantasy sports, and we have a great show coming up. With me is Wes Hubert, the PFF Fantasy College Football lead writer. You can follow him on Twitter at PFF_Wes. Wes, how's it going?
Doing great, Matt. Looking forward to talking about our content, and it's we got a short little break before the bowl season starts. So, we have a lot to talk about. So let's get to it.
Exactly. In just about a week, we will be treated to the first bowl games of the college football season. I'm really excited. There are some great matchups to look forward to and a lot of draft-eligible prospects to watch in what could be their final collegiate games. There will be so much information to cover, and at Pro Football Focus, we've got you covered with all the football content you can handle, and you can have access to all of it with the PFF Fantasy Gold Package for only $29.99. All right, Wes, it is award week. It's the 1 week of the college football season in which, with the exception of the classic Army-Navy game, the only thing going on in the football bowl subdivision is the bestowing of prestigious awards upon best players in college football. Last night, Thursday night, most of the major awards were handed out at the Home Depot 25th Anniversary College Football Award Ceremony. And then, of course, the Heisman will be awarded tomorrow, Saturday night. It's really a bittersweet week, almost no football, but we're presented with the opportunity to reflect on the regular season that was and really to think about the individual performances that shaped the season. So, Wes, let's reflect, and then also because we are a cantankerous crew, let's quibble a little bit. Let's look at some of these awards. Let's get your insight on the finalists, the winners, and most importantly, the players that you believe should have actually won the awards for their fantastic performances this season.
All right, yeah, and just to intro here, we have no football this week, but if you're an MMA fan, there is a huge UFC event on Saturday night, probably the best card I've ever seen. But anyway, yeah, I wanted to preface the awards because I had some difficulty trying to discover the criteria that the committees were using. The awards should and they are and should be considered far more important to the player careers than a simple bragging right. Players are drafted higher. They receive bigger contracts based off of these awards that are given each year, and they can even extend a player's career behind just simply because they were given that award, at least to some extent. But again, the details surrounding the criteria, it needs to be presented to the public. Why? Well, in order for fans to get behind the selection committee nominations, it needs to be fair. It needs to be equal. I believe the intelligence of college football fans in general is discounted behind the belief that the awards must only include the players from the biggest teams and the biggest and of the biggest names in college football. Yes, you name a player for an award that comes from the Alabamas, the Ohio States, and you're going to have the bigger following for that player. But what you're going to lose is the interest in the combination of the other 120 plus teams that feel that their team is not even going to be considered. A lot of these awards you'll find don't even have a single player winning the award in their history outside of a Power 5 conference. And are we going on a gut call? Are these committees going on a gut call, an eye test? If so, these awards are worthless. They need to be retired. We need to get into the day and age of analysis, and we need to present that information to the fans. We need criteria, and the players and the fans deserve equality.
All right, Wes, great stuff there. And talking about the MMA, you are such an offensive lineman. It's hilarious. All right, and on this show, we spent a lot of time looking at the DFS plays, so we don't talk much about the defensive side of the ball, but let's start there. One of the best players in the country, Ohio State's Joey Bosa, was not a finalist for the Chuck Bednarik and Bronco Nagurski Awards. Both of those awards honored the Defensive Player of the Year. Bosa could end up being a top 3 pick in the 2016 NFL Draft. The guy who ended up winning both of those awards was Temple's Tyler Matakevich. Wes, what are your thoughts? Should Bosa have been a finalist? And then ultimately, was Matakevich really the best defensive player of the year?
Well, no question, Matakevich was a great linebacker this season. But Bosa not only should have been nominated for these awards, he should have won both of these awards. I'll get into that a little bit later behind why I think that. But yeah, Matakevich, he was a great player. He put up a lot of the eye numbers. But to be honest, he wasn't even the best defender on his own team. And it wasn't even close. The defensive interior, Matt Ioannidis, had by far the better grade this season overall. And I mean, he put up 4 sacks, 9 hits, 15 hurries. He batted 3 passes, 26 stops, a terrorized offensive lineman all season. I graded a few Temple games, and he was clearly the best defender on the field. Now, Matakevich was definitely number 2, but I can't even get behind Matakevich as the top defender on the Temple Owls. And when we're looking at the Bednarik Award, we have to consider who the committee is. They're going for the best defensive collegiate player in the country, and it's voted on by head coaches, the Maxwell Football Club, sports writers, sportscasters. But we also have to remember this award is housed in Pennsylvania. Two of the 3 nominations in 2015 and 5 of the last 11 winners have played or have played for Pennsylvania programs. It's a little biased in my opinion. But yeah, when you get down to the Bronco Nagurski, we had the FWAA voting, and I mean, I thought they did a good job with a few of the players that they chose. I thought Jeremy Cash is absolutely one of the top defenders in the country, and for me, if I'm going for the top 3, it would be Joey Bosa, DeForest Buckner, and Jeremy Cash. So the Bednarik got it completely wrong, whereas at least the Bronco Nagurski got Jeremy Cash correctly. Shaq Lawson, another great player. Carl Nassib was definitely a good player, but he wasn't even the 3rd best defender in the Big Ten alone. To be honest, I'm not sure what the criteria is. I looked. I broke down as many statistics as I could and could not find a single statistic that would justify how these awards were chosen for their nominations. And the fact that Matakevich won in both is even more confusing to me.
Yeah, and great stuff there talking about the Pennsylvania connection with the Bednarik Award. Now let's go to the Dick Butkus Award, which honors the country's most outstanding linebacker. And I always love it when the Defensive Player of the Year is a linebacker and then the most outstanding linebacker is someone else. And that seems to happen quite a bit. This year, the award went to Notre Dame's Jalen Smith. What are your thoughts on Smith? And then who do you think should have gotten the award?
No question about Jalen Smith. To be honest, you could throw him in there over Jeremy Cash, and I would be perfectly fine with a DeForest Buckner, Joey Bosa, Jalen Smith trio. And basically, when you get past Joey Bosa and DeForest Buckner, it's all arguable on a handful of guys, and Jalen Smith is definitely one of those. I thought Leonard Floyd was a great addition to that group. And Reggie Ragland, he wasn't a top 5 linebacker, but definitely in the top 10 and one that deserves to be there. As far as Deion Jones, is that a joke? And I don't mean that to be funny or to get a laugh out of you. 60 tackles, 16 missed tackles. He wasn't even the best linebacker on LSU. Middle linebacker Kendall Beckwith was far more productive. And I also disagree with the Raekwon McMillan pick from Ohio State. He had a solid season, but he's not a top 5 linebacker. When we're going linebackers, I love the Floyd pick. I like Ragland there. I like Jalen Smith, of course, and I thought he was the deserving winner. But I'm going to put in Oklahoma's Eric Stryker, Missouri's Kentrell Brothers. Stryker had 37 tackles, 34 of those were stops, 8 sacks, and he had the #1 pass rush productivity grade among all linebackers. Kentrell Brothers, 117 tackles, 78 stops. He did have 17 missed tackles, but that's okay with 117 total tackles. He allowed 0 touchdowns in coverage, and he had 2 interceptions. These guys were obviously snubbed, and I just can't figure out the Deion Jones pick for the life of me.
All right, well, let's go to the Rotary Lombardi Award. I'm sure you have some interesting stuff to say about that. That award honors the most outstanding lineman in the country. The winner was defensive end Carl Nassib of Penn State. As you mentioned earlier, he was also a finalist for the Bednarik and the Nagurski Awards. Now, Joey Bosa, and we talked about him earlier, he was one of the 4 finalists for the Lombardi. Nassib beat him out. Wes, who do you think should have won the award?
Yeah, I mean, I applaud the committee because they got 2 guys that absolutely deserve to be there: Joey Bosa, Myles Garrett, and you can make the argument for Nassib. I mean, he's definitely had a great year for Penn State, and he led the nation in sacks, which is a fluky statistic, but a very lucky statistic. But again, he still did. I mean, like I said, the Rotary Lombardi committee here. They did a great job getting Bosa and Garrett in there. They're 2 of the most dominant defenders in the country. I mean, it seems kind of strange to me that we continue to see Shaq Lawson in these awards, but I mean, he was a great player. Don't get me wrong, but he's obviously the weak link in this group. You could make the case for respect for the number 1 team, but yeah, Bosa was number 1 by far. Garrett and Bosa are dialed in as 2 of the best defenders, and like I said earlier, Garrett is among that handful of guys that can be argued for that 3rd spot. But the fact that we don't have Bruckner in any of these awards is a complete oversight. His numbers are ridiculous. Bruckner was among interior defenders number 1 in sacks, number 1 in hits, number 1 in hurries, number 1 in batted passes, number 1 in tackles, number 2 in stops. I mean, it's ridiculous that he's not on these lists.
Wes, this doesn't really apply to the Rotary Lombardi Award, but it does apply to the Butkus Award. Well, actually, not even the Butkus Award, but the Bednarik and the Nagurski Awards. It seems that in college football, there is, on the defensive side of the ball, a strong bias towards linebackers. I would say at the exclusion of defensive linemen. Can you talk just a little bit about that, and really like how important are the linebackers in comparison to edge rushers or those interior linemen who get a lot of stops?
Yeah, I mean, well, the linebackers are the ones putting up the sexy tackle totals, and they're the ones bringing in a lot of the headlines. But honestly, when you have a dominant defensive line like Ohio State, your linebackers' numbers are going to suffer. You've got Adolphus Washington and Joey Bosa, 2 of the top overall players at their position, if not the top. And you're just not going to have as many players get through the line for the linebackers to eat up. For Matakevich that we talked about, yeah, he had 111 tackles, and that's great, but he had a lot of missed tackles, and to be honest, he saved his worst performances for Notre Dame, the blowout to South Florida, and the conference championship to Houston. Against South Florida and Houston, he had 15 tackles and 9 missed tackles. How is he the best defensive player in the country? But yeah, to get back to your question, there definitely is a preference for the guys with the high tackle numbers, the high sack totals, there are times when that defender is absolutely deserving. You have guys that are just absolutely dominating the tackle totals for their team, but also getting through the offensive line. For me, I need more than just a tackle number. Yeah, we need to have some type of criteria that helps to equal the playing field for these overall defensive awards, because a defensive end or a defensive interior is doing just as much work as all these linebackers, but the linebackers get the sexy statistic to give them the award. And Matakevich is probably going to be overdrafted based on these awards, to be honest, when he does go pro.
All right, Wes, great stuff there. We're going to shift from defense to offense. But before that, with no college football DFS this week, I'm going to encourage you to shift from college to the NFL, because there is still 1 week fantasy football for the full slate of NFL games at DraftKings.com, where it already feels like the playoffs. With millions of dollars being won each week, every play in every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. This isn't fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use the promo code PFF. With your first deposit, you can play for free in Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. Enter PFF for a free entry now at DraftKings.com. That is DraftKings.com. All right, let's shift to the offensive side of the ball. And let's start with the big guys up front who make it all possible, the offensive linemen. The Outland Trophy honors the most outstanding interior lineman. The award can go to an offensive or defensive player. This year it went to Stanford guard Joshua Garnett. Wes, who would you have chosen?
Joshua Garnett. If I was going an offensive lineman, and to be honest with the number of awards that are already out there for defenders, I almost feel like this award should favor the offensive lineman, to be honest. I thought Drango was a great addition to the list. Not the top tackle in the country, but definitely top 5, top 7. A'Shawn Robinson was a little discouraging. He's honestly a guy that is outside almost the top 40 in defensive interior players in the country. Like I already mentioned, DeForest Bruckner, obviously the guy that was snubbed here, but guys like Jonathan Bullard of Florida, Sheldon Day of Notre Dame, Adolphus Washington of Ohio State were clearly better players. Of course, Robinson plays for Alabama, and that's great. And zero knock, absolutely zero knock on the solid season by Robinson. But the nomination is undeserving. But yeah, I thought Garnett, he played for the top run blocking offensive line in the country. So I thought he was a great choice as the winner of this award.
Yeah, I hear you there. It really, in part, speaks to how great that whole offensive line was in enabling Christian McCaffrey to have the production that he did. Now, let's go to the John Mackey Award. It honors the most outstanding tight end. Arkansas's Hunter Henry won the award. Wes, I know that a lot more goes into being a tight end than just catching the ball, so I understand why Western Kentucky's Tyler Higbee didn't win the award, but he wasn't even a finalist. Also, I really don't think of Henry as an outstanding tight end. Wes, who do you think was actually the most outstanding tight end this season?
This is another award that maybe if we had a little better understanding of the criteria that they used, we might be better prepared to agree with their nominations. Based on potential. NFL potential, yeah, these all three, Henry, Austin Hooper, Jordan Leggett, they all have NFL potential, and I'm not going to knock that in any way, but this list is far from accurate. We really need to know what the positional criteria was. Let's look at some of the ranks for each of these. For Hooper, 19th in yards, 26th in receptions in the country among tight ends, 6th in touchdowns, number 46 in his run blocking production grade. Jordan Leggett, 17th in yards, 19th in receptions, 4th in touchdowns, number 212 in the country in run blocking production. Tyler Higbee, you mentioned that maybe he didn't deserve. Absolutely not. Actually, he should have won this award. Despite missing multiple games for an injury, he still finished 10th in yards, 12th in receptions, 1st in touchdowns, which obviously is something that this committee chose to base their choices on, with 3 guys all towards the top of the country. But he was also number 30 in the country in run blocking production. Jalen Samuels of North Carolina State. I'm not even going to get into his rushing statistics or his rushing touchdowns. He was number 3 in yards, number 1 in receptions, number 4 in touchdowns. Now, he did have the number 93 run blocking production grade, but as far as versatility goes, Jalen Samuels was absolutely a dominant tight end. I just wonder if they actually categorized him as a tight end in their selection process. And then Jake Butt of Michigan, number 2 in yards, number 4 in receptions. He was 56th in touchdowns. That wasn't a passing offense, but and he did have 100. He was 198th in run blocking production, but I think that was based mostly on the lack of running backs for the Wolverines. They were definitely hurting in the backfield this year. But Jake Butt had a great season, and I mean, not that I think he's deserving of winning the award, but to me, it's Higbee and then Samuels, and they're not even nominated.
Yeah, I was trying to be diplomatic, but Higbee would have been the guy for me. And Samuels is such an intriguing player in that he has such versatility for the tight end position. And you're right, there is a question as to how they would have categorized him. But I imagine that your sort of classic small-bodied H-back would still qualify for this award. So it is curious that I would say the most productive players at this position in the country weren't finalists, and it seems like there was a pretty focused big school bias that resulted in this list of finalists that we had. Now let's stick with the pass catchers, and let's look at the Biletnikoff Award, the Fred Biletnikoff Award. It honors the most outstanding receiver in the country. I have to say, this is my favorite award. So many college offenses are now built around the passing game, and there are so many good wide receivers in the game nowadays, but they never are acknowledged with the Heisman, the Maxwell, the Walter Camp. So this year, the award went to Corey Coleman of Baylor. It's hard to take umbrage with that selection. Coleman had a fantastic year. At the same time, fellow finalists Josh Doxson from TCU and Laquan Treadwell from Mississippi, they had good seasons. There were lots of other wide receivers who had good seasons. And I have to say, Doxson and Treadwell, they were also very sharply dressed at the award ceremony. They looked good. But Wes, who would you have chosen for the Biletnikoff Award?
Yeah, I have zero complaint on Corey Coleman being chosen. 20 touchdowns is an amazing achievement for a wide receiver, and who knows what he would have achieved if they had kept Seth Russell or even Jared Stidham healthy for the season. And then the same with Josh Doxson. He was definitely deserving. I do want to mention I do respect this award a lot, despite it being an award that is handed out by the Tallahassee Quarterback Club Foundation. No member of the Board of Trustees in the foundation has a vote in the award. They completely use journalists, commentators, broadcasters, and former players to decide on the award. So it makes a lot of sense that Corey Coleman would come out ahead. Now, Laquan Treadwell, there's no denying his NFL potential. This guy is going to be a guy on Sunday that we're all going to look at for DFS and fantasy alike. But I do disagree with his inclusion on this list. I mean, of course, like I said, Coleman, Doxson, great choices, but Sterling Shepard was an obvious snub. We did a poll amongst all of the analysts at PFF, and actually Sterling Shepard was the top wide receiver for the Heisman Award amongst our staff. And I mean, let's just look through the numbers. Treadwell committed 7 penalties this year. He lost a fumble. He dropped 9 and allowed 5 intended passes to be intercepted. Shepard, 1 penalty, 0 fumbles, 4 drops, 1 interception allowed. Let's look at the eye stats, the candy that is probably went into a lot of people's decisions for this award. Treadwell, 77 catches, 1,098 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaged 14.3 yards per catch. And I believe he had a couple touchdown passes in there. That's a great season. It's definitely one of the best in the SEC, if not the best. Shepard, 78 catches, 1,179 yards, 11 touchdowns, 15.3 yards per receptions, and he also returned punts for the team. It's not even close for me. Shepard was actually a little under-targeted to begin the season, but the way he played late in the year against the top teams in the Big 12 just really blew me away. I've never been as high on Sterling Shepard as I am now, and I thought he was a definite snub from this award.
Yeah, Wes, you're absolutely right that Shepard's production just seemed to amplify as the season went on. I wonder if there was a desire by the selectors not to have three finalists all from the Big 12. And I think really Shepard might have gotten just the short end of the bargain there because of just a desire not to have three guys in it from a conference that really emphasizes a fast-paced, widespread offense.
Mhm.
But actually, I'd like to get your thoughts on two guys from a smaller conference. Taywan Taylor from Western Kentucky, who had a lot of great production this year, and then also Roger Lewis from Bowling Green State, who also was very productive. I don't think they were at the level of being finalists for this award, but both of them had very good seasons on their own, and it wouldn't have been surprising maybe in a different season without someone like Corey Coleman or Doxson really blowing the roof off the place if one of those guys had kind of been an outlier finalist. What are your thoughts on them?
Yeah, they're definitely two of the top wide receivers this season. The one issue I had with the Bowling Green guy is that he was basically used on deep passing, 20+ yard attempts. I know he was the nation's leader in 20+ yard receptions, yards, and touchdowns. But yeah, Roger Lewis, and he to me was a little dependent on the long ball. To a little too dependent, to be honest. I actually like Garrett Dieter on his team, not as that saying that he's any better than Lewis, but the fact that Dieter, he was right there with him with receptions and not too far behind in yards. And you can't, if you saw the game where he caught the one-handed touchdown passes, one with each hand at both ends of the end zone, that was an amazing game for him. But yeah, Roger Lewis had a great year, and there's no denying his ability. And then same for Taywan Taylor. He was a great player for Brandon Doughty, who Doughty actually had the top passing grade this year. So it really says a lot about his receivers, and of course he had Tyler Higbee, but he lost Higbee for several games there, and they kept trucking with Taylor, and Nicholas Norris was also a great player down the stretch for them. But when we're talking about Doxson and Coleman and Shepard and Treadwell, I guess they're not as dynamic of players, and they have their place in the draft coming up, but I don't see them as the type of players that could dominate in the Power Five. Now, with the right quarterback and the ability to catch the ball, they could have put up great numbers. But we're talking about some special players here. I mean, Corey Coleman and Josh Doxson could be the two best wide receivers in Big 12 history, and Sterling Shepard's not far behind. So these are some elite players we're talking about. But yeah, I agree, those are two guys to definitely keep an eye on, and to be honest with you, I think some of the smaller schools deserve just as much recognition and just as much of a chance to be listed among these awards, and even if they need to expand, I think that's a big reason why these awards are not as coveted, amongst college football fans as they should be, is because a lot of teams aren't even considered. You go, like I said earlier, you go down the list of the winners of these awards, and there's not a single player outside the Power Five. That's a crime to me, and it's something that should be changed.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now let's transition from the pass catchers to the passers themselves. There's the Davey O'Brien Award. It honors the best quarterback in the nation. Unsurprisingly, it went to Clemson's Deshaun Watson. Now, Wes, this is just me, and I say this as a TCU alum, so I'm certainly not unbiased. I think it would have been really cool in a perfect world to see TCU quarterback Trevone Boykin, who was a finalist, win an award for quarterbacking named in honor of a TCU quarterback who led the team to a national championship in his senior year. It was not to be. Wes, do you think that Deshaun Watson was the right choice? And if not, who would you have gone with?
Yeah, I do not think he was the right choice. If we're gonna look at this based purely on potential, based off of how a team has succeeded, where, I believe he was undefeated last year when he was prior to getting injured, and then this year he's undefeated. Absolutely, Deshaun Watson is your guy. But that's, again, we're getting into this cloudy realm of what is the actual criteria for this award. This is again a Texas-based award, and like you said, out of TCU is where it originated. I thought it would have been excellent as well for Travell Boykin, and to be honest, prior to the Oklahoma State game, he was the top quarterback in the country. And that game pretty much sealed the deal for him when he lost Doxson and had suffered an injury himself. But overall, the top quarterback this year was Baker Mayfield, and it's not even close. We're talking about a guy that finished with a passing grade, or with an overall grade, excuse me, of 20% higher than anybody else. Deshaun Watson had a great year. But he was pretty far down there, number 8, wasn't even a top 5 quarterback. And I mean, for these three, you could make the argument that they all deserve to be in this group. And if you argue that, then it's going to lead to pretty much an argument. But when you look at just the passing grade alone, this season, which just basically his passing production, he's almost outside the top 20. He's number 18. He was greatly helped by his rushing ability. But if we're going to look at that criteria, then why isn't Greg Ward Jr. on this list? I mean, if we're going completely separate from wins and where a team is ranked, I mean, Greg Ward Jr. was just as good as Deshaun Watson. Now he's outside the Power 5, but I discussed that earlier. I don't think that the only Power 5 players should be considered. This should be a national award. And if we're just going on passing statistics alone, I mean, Brandon Doughty was the top passer in the country. Baker Mayfield was just as good of a runner this year for Oklahoma on a efficiency level as Watson, and he had twice the passing grade that Watson did. Mason Rudolph was the number 4 passer in the country at season's end, and he didn't even play in the last game. He potentially could have finished number 1. And then you have Bowling Green's Matt Johnson, who was, I mean, just everything and more for that Bowling Green Falcons team. Honestly, Travell Boykin deserved to be there based off of everything he did up to the Oklahoma State game. Baker Mayfield deserved to be there. Deshaun Watson is just he's in there for token reasons, to respect the number 1 team. He's a good quarterback, has all the potential in the world. Will go into the 2016 season, in my opinion, with Mason Rudolph as the top 2 quarterbacks, but he doesn't deserve to be on this list based off of his performance this year.
And Wes, just as a personal side, I want to congratulate you for waiting only 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the quarterback spiel to mention Mason Rudolph. That was nicely done. You restrained yourself very well. All right, I think it's time for us to get to the man of the hour, Alabama running back Derrick Henry. To me, this guy is like an unholy combination of Adrian Peterson and Brandon Jacobs. Who knows if he's nearly as athletic as either of those guys, but that's what he reminds me of. This year, he won the Doak Walker Award, which honors the best running back in the nation. And to top it off, he also won the Maxwell and the Walter Camp Awards. Both of those respectively honor the most outstanding player in the nation and the player of the year, as if there's really a distinction between those two titles. Wes, do you think that Henry is actually the best running back in the nation? And then do you think that he deserved the Maxwell and the Walter Camp?
This is a trick question that you're asking me. He's not the best running back in the nation. But at the same time, he put up one of the top seasons in the past 5 years. And so we really shouldn't take anything away from him here. But the fact that Christian McCaffrey is only a true sophomore may have played into his selection, or his not being selected, whereas Henry was. I'm a little confused how McCaffrey didn't at least pull in one or two of these, and if not all of them, to be honest with you. To me, he's the Doak Walker, Walter Camp, and Maxwell Award winners. He had the absolute best season for any player in the past 27 years, going back to Barry Sanders. I just think I cannot wrap my head around this. But to go down these awards individually, the Doak Walker, Henry, and McCaffrey absolutely deserve to be there. Leonard Fournette did not. Now, there are several at PFF that would completely disagree with me, and that's fine. And I've read their arguments, and I think that they are definitely good arguments. But Fournette, he was great from week 2 through week 8, no question, no doubt, taking nothing away. But out of those games, only Mississippi State and Florida were brag worthy on the schedule. His performances from week 10 through 12, it should have removed his name from all of these lists. 3 games, 21 carries a game, 77 yards per game, 3.7 average, 2 total touchdowns, and 2 fumbles against Alabama, which I completely understand that. But we need guys that can transcend the opponent. And he was unable. Arkansas, Ole Miss, 2 other good defenses, but not dominant. And they were all losses, 3 straight losses. How is he still being considered if we're basing this off of team success? Again, I don't know what the criteria are. In addition, a huge cloud surrounds the potential illegal activity that he was involved in. And if he would have won the award, would have been a stain had he been found guilty of anything. Something I mentioned on a previous podcast. I think that should immediately have eliminated him from any of the award lists. To me, he should have been replaced with Ezekiel Elliott. Top blocking running back, by miles. 1 drop, 1 fumble all season. 100-plus yards in 11 or 12 games against Michigan State, which he only received, 12 or 13 carries, multiple touchdowns in 6 of 12 games this season, only 1 game without a touchdown. And if not him, let's go Dalvin Cook, #1 elusive rating and breakaway percentage in the country. That had, while Pro Football Focus has only collected statistics for college for 2 years, he is the only guy to do that. 100-plus yards in 8 of 11 games, and he was injured in 2 of those games that he did not reach that number. 175-plus in 4 of those games, 150-plus in 6 of those games, multiple touchdowns in 7 of 8 that he was uninjured. There are 2 guys right there, much more deserving, much more consistent. But getting back to Derrick Henry, I think he deserved the award, and we're going to see McCaffrey again next year. But man, that's a tough oversight, and I can go down into the Walter Camp Player of the Year, which is supposed to go into more of just an overall offensive player. But what are your thoughts on McCaffrey being snubbed in these awards?
Yeah, it's one of those things. As you mentioned, it would be very nice to know what the criteria are and how they consider someone outstanding and player of the year. But I think that I think the one thing about Henry was that game to game, he was highly consistent. And if there's one drawback that you could look at with McCaffrey, it would be that there were a couple of games in which his team needed him to be the best player on the field, to produce like the best player on the field, and he didn't. And that's not to say that he had bad games. It's just in those games, he didn't have 100 scrimmage yards, or he didn't get the touchdown that was needed. He did have some monstrous games, and as an all-around weapon, he is outstanding. What he can do as a receiver is unparalleled, I think, for any of the other running backs that we're really looking at for this year's draft or next year's draft. So he definitely is an outstanding weapon. I think what maybe gives Henry the edge in the mind of people who would be evaluating these players for an award is that Henry, in granted, you have to say he was in the SEC. That's probably something that gave him some benefit there. And then also Alabama has a better record. They are in the playoffs. I think that also factored in larger than anyone would want to admit. And then just on a game-to-game basis, really with the exception of one game against an FCS team, right? Like for the most part, in the games that mattered, Henry really did what he needed to do. So I think that's the difference. If it had gone to McCaffrey, I wouldn't have quibbled at all. With it going to Henry, I'm not really quibbling about it. I think both of those guys are very deserving of the award.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think that Henry, he absolutely had a tremendous year, and actually it was a historic year for the SEC. Nobody had ever had that many touchdowns rushing, and I mean he set himself up for these awards, and you know, and I think that when we're looking at, like you said, and I do agree with you now. Listening to your analysis, I think based on pure running backs. I think Henry probably does deserve to win the award. That, you know, just based on who was the best running back in the country, the Doak Walker, absolutely give it to Derrick Henry. But when we're going down to the Walter Camp and the Maxwell Award, we're looking at the Player of the Year overall. Now, to me, Henry is not the best player overall. He does very little in the passing game. I mean, minuscule. He doesn't block very well. I don't have that number in front of me, but he is not a good blocker. That is something that is going to limit his NFL potential for several years. McCaffrey does all these things, and you know, just like you said, you know. And then I also would like to say, as far as the Walter Camp Award, 0 non-Power 5 winners in the history of the award. That is a joke. That needs to change. They need to have people outside of the Power 5 coming to this award that are deserving. And I'll be honest, I want to applaud them for having Desmond King nominated, a cornerback out of Iowa. That is an absolute step in the right direction. It's not the correct defensive player, but he's definitely deserving to be there. Again, I would remove King, put Joey Bosa in there, and I see the clear preference for nominating Watson in basically every eligible award that's been given out, and it's clear respect for the number one team in the playoffs. But are we talking about the Player of the Year, or are we talking about the team MVP? To me, you could easily drop Watson and, you know, like I said, King for Bosa, but drop Watson and put another running back in there. Let's get a Royce Freeman out of Oregon. I mean, positive grade in 12 games this year, every game this year. I'm sorry, 100 plus yards in 10 of the 12. Touchdowns in 10 of the 12, multiple touchdowns in 5, 100 total yards in all 12 games, the 10th best pass productivity grade in the country. I want to see consistency. I want to see guys that don't have down games. Now, you did mention that there were times that McCaffrey was unable to come through for his team. I question whether it was his ability to. I'm not sure, or play calling, or he was still obviously one of the best players this year. Anybody that's broken a record that's stood for 27 years and held by a great such as Barry Sanders is definitely deserving of an award. But you know, I look at these awards. I understand the Doak Walker not going to McCaffrey, but the Walter Camp, the Maxwell, I think they both should have gone the direction of McCaffrey. And you know, what can we say now? It's probably going to be the Derrick Henry Heisman Award trophy ceremony coming up as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that distinction between a running back winning the Doak Walker and then competing against really the same running back and not winning the Maxwell and the Walter Camp, I think that's fair. I mean, historically, there have been guys who haven't won the Walker who have won the Maxwell or the Walter Camp. And I think as an all-around player, McCaffrey was certainly deserving. And you mentioned the Heisman. Let's go ahead and go there. Let's just close it out with a consideration of the 3 finalists for the Heisman Trophy. And it's perhaps the most distinguished individual award in all of team sports. The finalists are Henry, Deshaun Watson, and Stanford running back Christian McCaffrey. And if an offensive player wins the Maxwell and the Walter Camp, historically the odds are pretty good that guy ends up winning the Heisman. So as you mentioned, Henry, he looks like the front runner at this point. Do you think that he will win? Should he win? And who is your pick for the 2015 Heisman? I'm assuming it's McCaffrey, but I might be wrong.
You're absolutely correct. It's McCaffrey, and it's a sentiment that was overwhelmingly dominant among the PFF staff. Um, you have to look past the eye numbers and look at McCaffrey. You mentioned his passing, his receiving ability. We haven't even mentioned the fact that he was among the top 2 or 3 in the country as a kick returner. He impacted so many games returning the ball. I mean, it's a crime that he is not an award holder to this point and going into the Heisman Trophy. But let's just we can have hope, and if Deshaun Watson wins this award, I think they should go ahead and pack up the Heisman Trophy and redo the entire process, because Watson does not deserve to be even on this list. If we must have a quarterback, which I don't think we do, it's Baker Mayfield. There's no question about it. Watson threw 11 interceptions. This is from a very narrow point of view. Watson he threw 11 interceptions. Mayfield threw 5. What has Watson achieved that Mayfield has not this year? It is completely puzzling. But look, I don't even think a quarterback should be there. I saved the description of Joey Bosa for this award. I don't think he should win the award. I think he should finish second, and I think it should be a clear indication of what the Heisman Trophy stands for going forward, that the best players will be on this stage and considered for the award. And without Joey Bosa or DeForest Buckner, those 2 guys were better than Deshaun Watson this year. Overall, the impact that they had on their for their teams and on opposing teams was just as great as McCaffrey or Henry. Bosa is the clear omission. Why Bosa? Well, he was only number 37 in sacks among edge rushers, but I mentioned how fluky those numbers are. Just the fact that quarterbacks were able to throw the ball right as he hit them just killed his sack numbers. He had the number 1 overall grade among edge rushers in the country this year, and he was 33% higher than number 2. He was number 1 in hits, number 3 in hurries, number 5 in stops. In addition, he faced double and triple teams consistently all season, where teams were playing their best, going up against the defending national champion. And Ohio State, you knock them all you want, but they got the best from every team they played this year. Even down to teams like Northern Illinois and Hawaii. These teams were playing with passion. Not convinced that Bosa is a Heisman finalist. Let's just see who's drafted number 1 next year in the NFL draft, and then we'll decide who should have been put in the final 3 for the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, I hear you there. And I completely agree. Every team that played Ohio State wanted to be the team to take down the defending champion. Wes, any final thoughts on these the awards that have been handed out and just the Heisman coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a little harsh. I know that, and I don't mean to disrespect the committees or any fan of any player that I mentioned. I think when we get into the final bowl season, and we're looking at the best players from the full season, I'm just trying to be as unbiased as I can towards the individuals who deserve to be there. And I don't mean it as a knock on anyone's season, because everybody listed among these guys, other than maybe one LSU player, a linebacker, deserve to be on these lists. Everyone. I'm not unhappy with their selection. I just think there should be some equality and a little love from the committees to show us how are you choosing your players, and understand that when you select a player as your award winner, you are giving them a piece of your name that they are taking with them, and they will continue to cash in on that award for the remainder of their career. I think these awards should be elevated. Let's make it the absolute best. Let's make sure that everyone has a chance, and that's completely independent of conference. And let's just get it right, and that's all I'm really shooting for.
All right, Wes, fantastic stuff there. A fun and insightful conversation. And that will do it for this edition of the College Daily Slant. Be sure to tune in next episode for our breakdown of the first slate of college bowl games and, of course, our DFS plays of the week. You can catch us on PFF Radio, subscribe to the show on iTunes, listen to the show on Stitcher and Blog Talk Radio, and watch the show on YouTube and the Fantasy Sports Network. For Wes Huber on Twitter at PFF_Wes, I'm Matt Friedman, Matt F. the Oracle. Thanks for tuning in.